Good morning. A tip of the Webster hat this morning to Premier Bill Bennett of British Columbia. At long last, after much labour, he has conceived and brought forth his new cabinet in Victoria. And by the Lord Harry, he certainly needed a new change of seats, at least, in the cabinet in Victoria. And now he will drive forward to the election, sure and confident that he can wipe out that man Barrett when the time comes. Well, let's just take a little look at some of the appointments, some of the changes, and tell you, in my humble opinion, with the usual deference, respect and humility, how good the changes are. First of all, there's my old buddy, the second worst Attorney General British Columbia ever had, Gardy Gardam. Hello, Gardy. Gardy goes from the AG's office to intergovernmental affairs. Will suit him down to a T. There's much more time for squash in that particular portfolio. And of course he's got his old buddy, not his old buddy, the party's old buddy Dan Campbell being set up in BC House in Ottawa so that we have a vibrant presence there at all times. Now, who takes the Attorney General's place? None other than Alan Williams, like Gardy, a sometime Liberal. Is that good or is that bad? That's good, because Williams is a good lawyer and he will make a good Attorney General. And I'm sure he was sick and tired of the Labour portfolio, and he may well clean up the administrative shambles, which is much of the problem in the Attorney General's department. Now, what about the new Labour minister? Don't even know the guy, haven't met him. His name is Heinrich. He comes from Prince George. That might be good, that might be bad. The Labour leaders don't like him because you mention Prince George and social credit, you automatically think of right-to-work laws. But we'll suspend judgment on Mr. Heinrich. Then we come to another Liberal, who has finally found his happy retirement portfolio in the social credit government. And that is dear Dr. Patrick McGeer. He's managed to dump education on the grade school kids, and he's got a new portfolio all to himself, sciences, I think it is, and universities. And he is the best friend the universities ever had. But what about education? Well, the new boy, Brian Smith, there he is, Brian had to get the job because Bennett was short a cabinet minister from Vancouver Island. He's got so few members there that they had to be given a second portfolio. Brian Smith, Minister of Education, tell me the guy is quite literate and quite well educated, and who knows, despite the officials, might be able to do a half-decent job in education. One of the interesting moves is Curtis. Remember Curtis? A rather prissy man, but very bright. And he's gone from, of all things, he's gone to finance, Curtis. Now, Curtis is, I think he's able to count with his socks off. He can count up to 20 without any problem at all. And it doesn't really matter as finance minister, because we all know that the power of the finance minister still lies, despite the appearance, in the hands of the Premier himself. It's always been a Premier's job, finance in British Columbia. Evan Wolfe, God bless him, takes Curtis's old job, which was, oh no, he goes to provincial secretary. That's the kind of protocol boss of the government. McClelland, Bob McClelland, he's gone from health to energy, and people think this is something terribly significant. Not in the slightest. Health, if anything, is a more important portfolio in British Columbia from a political point of view than energy. Mayor, God bless him, goes from environment to health. That'll keep his mouth shut about constitutional changes. I have a feeling that Rafe talked too much to please Premier Bennett in any case, and was beginning to look a little bit like a man who wanted to occupy the Prime Minister's seat downstairs in the office in Victoria. Stephen Rogers, that's old Sugar Rogers we call him. Stephen had to be given the portfolio of environment, because Stephen might well have quit had he not been recognized after his restless periods in the backbench. Then we come to Grace McCarthy. My friend Gracie. Bennett fooled everybody. He didn't dump Gracie. He left her in a portfolio she doesn't like, but where she is. Human Resources and Deputy Premier. But that goes to show you that the power of Gracie and the party is such that Premier Bennett didn't dare to move her. And of course it leaves in total command Bill Bennett himself. God bless Willie Bennett. He's going to have to pull up his socks considerably and whip his new cabinet into good shape if he hopes to win the next election. by which time everybody, we hope, he hopes, will have forgotten dirty tricks. But on this happy Monday morning, let me say, they've got to be a better bunch of appointments than the last lot. Still on politics this morning, I'm going to talk to a man of considerable vitriol. I hope I can drag it out of him. By his own description, a varlet, a low, mean fellow. Backroom boy in the Tory party. Dalton Camp. Joe Clark used to be his office boy. And we'll have a chat with Dalton about his ex-office boy and Dalton's new book. He's here, of course, huckstering his book, Points of Departure, after the break. I thought that was a good crack. The second was the Attorney General. I'm not sure that I like the particular way that Dalton Camp, political backroom figure in the Conservative Party these many years, the way he relates the stories as a varlet. He is the third-person varlet, the kind of royal varlet all the way through. Varlet, medieval page preparing to be a squire, a menial low fellow, a rascal, from the Concise Oxford Dictionary. And this is the varlet in the shape of Dalton Camp who writes the book Points of Departure, which is, and I must explain this to you, split into 2 or 3 sections. The media watch on government in Canada, particularly Trudeau and Clark. The death watch, the death of the Trudeau government. And the wimp watch, which is an observation on the Clark government. But sir, despite your, as an ex-advertising man, your capacity for an attractive turn of phrase, I must compliment you, if you'll admit it, that you are the inventor of the greatest insult ever given to the Clark government, which you call in this book, the age of the Klutz. Do you plead guilty to that?
Yes, yes.
Why do you call the approaching the Clark government the age of the Klutz? Because you think Joe's a klutz?
I think that that what has happened is, and with the fall of Trudeau, is a very strong anti-elitist movement in the country. I found in Clark during the campaign and the whole bringing on of his leadership, extolling the virtues of being ordinary, that the ordinary people and the ordinary politician and the ordinary should really be the governing ethos in this country. And Trudeau gave that a lift too with some of the appointments he made.
In fact, Trudeau pointed out that the age of the klutz, in his own words, talking about the ordinary and the mediocre, would be the downfall of decent government in this country.
He said it in Winnipeg when he was the Trudeau that we all knew and loved in 1968.
Can you remember the quote?
It's in there. I don't have it by heart, no.
And so the age of the klutz doesn't actually refer to Joe Clark himself?
No, it refers to the era.
And to the people around him in the Conservative government?
It refers to what I call, I think it's demagoguery, because I don't think that you can expect good government to come out of an exaltation of the ordinary. I agree with Trudeau's statement. I don't think they meant it either, but it sounded good out there in Main Street.
I tend to oversimplify things. When you talk in your book, and it's well worth reading, even at whatever price it is.
It's the price of a gallon of gas for a tank of gas for the family car. That's what I say.
What, $25?
No, yesterday's price is $14.95.
$14.95. And then you turn to your final section in your book, which is the wimp watch.
Right.
Who is the wimp?
The wimp is Joe, but that's not my, I didn't discover the word. That's what it was called in the back of the bus, in the back of the plane. That was the media term for covering Clark during the campaign.
Is that fair? How can a man have a chance for respect and decency and progression if people like you and these Fotheringhams in the back of the bus can describe the Prime Minister of Canada as a wimp?
I think it's healthy. I think skepticism, that kind of skepticism, is kind of healthy compared to their endorsement of Trudeau. You know, they went overboard on Trudeau, didn't they? The gallery, the media people. And I think this is a reaction to that, among other things. But I agree with what I detect in your sort of understated rundown on the Cabinet of British Columbia. The view that these people are only human, just like we are. They have exalted titles, but that doesn't mean they're exalted people.
I did not call one of Mr. Bennett's appointment a wimp.
No, no, but you have other ways of putting it.
Anyway, let's get to the point of the story. Clark was in here Friday morning, and despite all the media denigration of him during the campaign, would you be surprised when I said, of course I'm just an ordinary fellow myself, one of the klutzes.
I know you feel that way about yourself, Jackie.
I'm one of the klutzes.
That's right.
That I was quite impressed with Joe Clark. He wasn't half as pompous, he was remarkably direct, and he answered, I think, almost without equivocation, except that which was necessary, my questions. Should I be surprised?
Well, a lot of people have been surprised by Clark.
Are you surprised by Clark?
No. No.
Was he not your office boy at one time?
That wouldn't be fair to put it that way. He was in summer employment in my office, and his assignments were basically political, though he also did some other things for
You
us.
at that time were what?
I was national president of the Conservative Party, and I was president of the company in which the office was.
In your book, I see a recognition that this Clark was something somewhat different from the ordinary political hanger-on. How different was he?
Well, he wasn't different in the hanger-on sense. He was different from the point of view of his age and his generation. He was not the same. He was very circumspect. He was very cautious. He was articulate. He thought clearly. He did a good job. He worked hard at what he did.
Didn't run around with women?
Not that I knew of. But
He never got drunk?
Never. Never.
Like-
No one ever saw him drunk. And he did nothing to excess, as I said about him in the book. And he didn't have that kind of office holders mentality that so many people, young people have who get into politics. That is, they like the office, they don't like the work. He loved it. He loved the work.
But
And,
no one was more surprised than you were, I presume, from the book, when he finally made his bid for the leadership and won it.
No one was more surprised. Although I voted for him, and although at the convention I knew he was going to win, I think I was more surprised when it seemed to me perfectly clear by the time we got to the media watch in Ottawa in March of this year that we were looking at the next Prime Minister of Canada. That was a surprise.
Will he be a good Prime Minister?
I don't think we know that, but I think the chances are as good as even, 50-50, that he could be a good Prime Minister. And he could be, if he's going to be a good Prime Minister, Jack, he's going to be Prime Minister for a long time.
Because he'll make no mistakes.
That's right, and he'll make the fewest number of enemies, the minimal, absolute minimal number.
Okay, you've described Joe Clark. Give me your finite sum up, if possible, in 25 words or less, on the career of Pierre Elliott Trudeau.
I think he was a magnificent failure. I think he's the only Prime Minister that I can remember who had real purpose, something in mind he wanted to achieve in this country. When he took up politics, when he acceded to the leadership, when he became Prime Minister, and he blew it. But he still leaves a considerable mark of his influence on the country. He was still the most intelligent, and he had more style. He was more contemporary than any Prime Minister we've ever had.
Should he be forgiven, though, for ruining the opportunity to lead this country and being the unifying force he could have been, instead of, as he did, fouling up so many things and insulting so many specific groups and messing up the administration of the country? Should he ever be forgiven?
Well, I find it easy to forgive him. As you perhaps detected reading the book, I felt great sympathy for him. And I think a lot of the things that got in his way, that obscured his vision of the country, that prevented him from doing well, were other reasons than political reasons.
You mean the family troubles?
I think so.
But then again, a Prime Minister can't afford to have these kind of troubles. He can't be forgiven for that either, can he?
Well, I can forgive him for that because I don't think he had much influence upon it. But you're right in your premise. Very hard to be Prime Minister of this country when you're distracted. Very hard to run for office when you have those distractions, and very hard to be leader of the opposition and try and fight your way back when you have it. So it's a tragedy.
Mm-hmm. It really is a tragedy. But the age of the klutz is now at hand, and we're going to have mediocre, ordinary government with the Conservative Party, which hasn't changed very much, has it, from the time when you were Diefenbaker's. Were you Diefenbaker's? What were you? Director.
No, I was never the national director, but I was national chairman of the campaign organization.
You were national chairman of the campaign organization, and you were the man who turned scalpel in hand and destroyed the Diefenbaker government single-handedly.
They were no longer the government. My last act for Diefenbaker as national chairman was I was one of the few who supported him in the '63 campaign as national chairman, which is when he fell from power. That was the last time I ran a campaign for him, and I supported him all the way through through the '65 election. I even ran in 1965 as a candidate,
defeated.
And was defeated by Mitchell Sharp.
Imagine being defeated by Mitchell Sharp.
I don't know. I didn't mind being defeated by Mitchell Sharp, but at least, as they said in the business, we kept Mitchell home. Maybe we shouldn't have kept him home. We might have done better. But it was Diefenbaker's, one of his best campaigns was the '63 campaign.
It was after that that you turned on Diefenbaker.
It was after that that I didn't turn on Diefenbaker. Oh, that's the mythology, Jack.
Straighten me out in the mythology after this commercial break.
Okay.
Perhaps with Dalton Camp, Tory backroom, well, he's not a Tory backroom boy now. You never were the national director of the Conservative Party. Campaign chairman.
No, national president.
You were national president.
And I sure wasn't in the back room when I was national president.
And you were campaign chairman for Diefenbaker.
Yes.
And then what were you in the Stanfield campaign?
Consultant, advisor, friend.
Friend, and his great backer. And it broke your heart that he never became prime minister.
Great disappointment.
Would he have been a good prime minister?
I think he would have been a great one.
He really would have been.
I think he had the necessary patience and qualities and intelligence to do it.
Looking at the Conservative Party over these years, though, do you see it changing at all, or will it merely kind of progress under a consensus and compromise and do all the things that governments nowadays must do to survive, like 15% or 14% bank rates, and just limp along as a kind of middle-of-the-road country not doing all that well?
Well, I think you can find that out when they have some options. But I don't believe they have any options today. I mean, they have to do what they have to do. They have to raise oil prices. They have to let the interest rate fluctuate according to the Canadian dollar and international rates, or American rates preferably. So there's not much that a little country like this can do in a world such as it is today, in either energy or in economic and fiscal policy.
But let's talk about the leadership again. The man Clark, who had no base, how did he ever manage, if you can trace it for me simply, to become Prime Minister of this country? Because traditionally, you've gone from a base. We're looking at the Liberals now, we're looking at Thumper MacDonald, and we're looking at... John, and he doesn't seem to be that important.
Well, we're going to have a look at him now for the first time. He's been just another pretty face in Canadian politics, but now he's going to be subject to a more vigorous scrutiny by people like yourself and a lot of people who aren't going to take it as easy on him as they have in the past.
Yeah, he's not the heir apparent. Let's go to Liberals for a moment. Is there an heir apparent right now for the convention in March?
I think a lot of the rank and file in the party, particularly in Western Canada, and a lot of the people on the street who aren't going to be delegates, consider him to be the legitimate heir to Trudeau.
All right, now let's switch to the Clark situation. Clark came from nowhere to become Prime Minister of this country, to become leader of the party and Prime Minister.
Right.
How did he do that? Can you give me the textbook that might be written for whoever is the young, bright, experienced politician, student leader in Western Canada who can do a Joe Clark for the Liberals? How did he do it?
There's a great song that my daughter sings. It's called Keep Your Mouth Shut. And Clark kept his mouth shut for years. He never really committed himself so that you could identify him in any of the great trials and tribulations that beset the Conservative Party in the 60s, right? Nevertheless, he was an important figure, but he was very, very discreet, and he never was on anybody's side, one side or the other side. He was up the middle, and therefore no one had a book on Clark when the time came for him to run for leadership. But he didn't win the leadership. Sure, he won, but he really won because the red Tories in the party who decide these things, it's always the red Tory vote, which is not very big, but it always makes the difference. It elects Michael Meehan as national president, it elected me as national president twice, it elected Stanfield at the convention, it elected Clark at his convention. We're terrified that if Flora MacDonald came second after, let us say, Mulroney dropped out, then Wagner would win, because there just were too damn many delegates who wouldn't buy a woman as the leader of the party. And so there was a rush to Clark, and there were people who wore Flora MacDonald buttons who went in there and voted for Clark in the second and third ballots. And they did so not because they were convinced about Clark, but because they were terrified of Wagner. And history, of course, has borne out that that was a genuine cause for concern. So Joe won. He won, you know, he won by the exercise of the thing he preaches, consensuality. I mean, there was a consensus of opinion at that convention among the people who had votes to maneuver with.
But there was a
special, had to be Clark.
There was a special set of circumstances.
That's right. And then it went on to a special set of circumstances in the country, Jack. They wanted to get rid of Trudeau.
But let's do the Tory one first. The special set of circumstances was that this ex-liberal, this ex-judge, this Quebecer with the trust funds, Mr. Wagner.
Yes, he wasn't the only one in the party that had that, but carry on.
No, but he was the man of whom the Tories, they didn't like him, did they?
Well, there were legitimate
reasons.
reasons.
The law and order man, bring back capital
fear
punishment.
him as a leader because of his temperament.
So the choice at one time was between Wagner and the very attractive red Tory Flora MacDonald.
That would have been the natural order of things, a confrontation in the last ballot between Flora and Wagner.
And you're telling me that because of the fear of some of even the red Tories that a woman might become Prime Minister?
No, Jack. The fear was that if that was down to the last ballot between Wagner and Flora, that votes would go to Wagner simply because people didn't want a woman. Now, it wasn't that the red Tories wouldn't have supported Flora, but there wouldn't have been enough in that circumstance. That was the fear, because as you know, Wagner ended up with Diefenbaker's support, with Horner's support, with all Hellier's support, all the right-wing support. But then you had this other ingredient. A lot of people, a lot of women wouldn't.
Unfortunately, here is Joe with his small base of a few people. He only had
hardly none
to begin with.
That's right. Corporal's Guard out of Alberta.
A Corporal's Guard out of Alberta,
right.
And he picks up all the votes and all the anti-Wagner votes.
That's right. He picked up all that, and he picked up the red Tory vote, most of the red Tory vote. So in the end, it was crucial. Flora went to him, of course. In the end, had to.
So the man who was sitting in your place Friday morning became Prime Minister of Canada by the sheerest happenstance.
Oh, yeah, it's the story of his life. But he's always been in the right place at the right time.
But he hadn't done anything before he became leader of the party, had he?
Which helped enormously.
I mean, he was an unknown backbencher who had worked for you and Diefenbaker.
Very slightly known as a backbencher, and he didn't try and make himself a big presence in Parliament. He's not a fellow who rushes his fences. But I think look, from the time he was 25 years old, Jack, I think he had it in his head that he was going to get there someday.
Will he be able to control the old-time people on the front, who thought they were going to be on the front bench, who hate him? I'm presuming they hate him.
I think so now, because there's this great need for discipline in the party, because the margins are so small, and because now the Conservative Party genuinely feels threatened. They were pretty comfortable with Trudeau there. They always knew the next time around, or they thought they knew they could beat him again, that he was still dead in the water in Ontario, and all they'd have to do was get enough votes to outnumber that big, massive block of seats that he got out of Quebec. So they weren't concerned. But now with Trudeau gone, it's a new ball game, to coin a phrase, and they're not as comfortable now.
You see, when I was reading your book, Points of Departure, about the Wimp Watch, I thought Dalton's going to hate him, and then through your connections with him and the letters he wrote, it becomes quite obvious that you respected his tenacity and his single-mindedness of purpose in trying to build the party.
Always a party man. In fact, more of a party man than any leader that I've known. I mean, he was truly obsessed with the party, and he believed really in the party, not only in the caucus as being the party, but all those Tories outside.
He's only 40 now.
That's right. Now,
we're liable to have him for Prime
Mackenzie
Minister.
King maybe
we're
reincarnated right in front of us.
We're liable to have Joe Wimp for 25 years.
Easily.
Or would you call him Joe Klutz?
No, I call him Mr. Prime Minister.
Dalton Camp and Webster after the break. The varlet is Dalton Camp, his own description of himself in Points of Departure. I'm not going to ask you about political... Oh, I must ask you about strategy. Now that Trudeau has walked away, what will Joe do? Just sit there solid and govern without fear of being defeated by the Liberals?
Oh, yes. In that context, he's safe until the end of March. No one would be lunatic enough to bring down the government, although there are some people in the Conservative Party, I know, who are saying, to hell with this for sportsmanship, go.
Wouldn't you do that yourself?
I don't think the country, I think there's too much nice-Nellyism and good guyism and sportsmanship.
Wasn't Stanfield guilty of nice-Nellyism in one crisis when Pearson's government could have been brought down on a non-confidence motion?
No. I think there again, Jack, when Tommy Douglas said that he was prepared to go back in the House and vote again, that killed it, because the Grits with the Socreds and with Douglas had enough. Didn't matter what Stanfield did.
It didn't matter. He didn't miss an
Unfortunately,
opportunity.
it didn't.
But I mean, you wouldn't blame Joe for going against the Liberals without a leader if by chance he was defeated on a major issue, would you?
No, legitimately he could go then, no question.
If they defeat him.
That's right. If the Tories could arrange an accident, but I think they're all too smart in the House. They're not the only ones who don't want an election. I mean, there are 4 parties in the House.
NDP doesn't want one.
No. And you know, after the convention, there still may be 3 parties in the House who don't want an election. If it's Turner, they may want to keep Turner right there so the country could have a good look at him as leader of the opposition. He may not be a great leader of the opposition. Not everybody's cut out for it. And they'll just keep him there, and the Grits will be isolated.
The only thing I can remember about Turner, really, apart from being finance minister, was that he once dated Princess Margaret.
Well, I remember him too as Minister of Justice. He's a very, very pleasant, personable guy, socially. But I don't know whether that butters any parsnips when the grand assize takes place.
Your opinion of him as a minister was not high, I gather.
I think he was a good minister of justice, and I think as a finance minister, the record will all be trotted out. We'll all have a good look at it. But my recollection is that he was a disaster.
Between the two of them, pick the better man for me. And you're now a non-partisan observer. Thumper or Turner? MacDonald or Turner?
I would be inclined to vote for MacDonald, but if I put aside my judgment of men and so on quality and judged it on possibility, winning, which I think a lot of Liberals will do, I can see where a lot of people would vote for Turner at that convention.
For the bilingual capacity alone?
The bilingual capacity, he's supposed to be, you could tell me this, but he's supposedly much more popular in the West than MacDonald, and MacDonald's almost unknown.
MacDonald is unknown in the West. Turner is almost forgotten in the West.
Well, I hear he has, according to Alan Fotheringham, nests of supporters tucked away in the corporate structure.
These are only Fotheringham's Shaughnessy legal friends. Fotheringham doesn't mix with the common klutz anymore. Fotheringham's just between here and the 4 Seasons in Ottawa, that's all.
And signing autographs.
And signing autographs,
that's right.
Of course.
Well, he's a dear friend. He's made a great impression in Ottawa, and he's well read in the country, as you know. People read and enjoy Fotheringham. But I still say in Winnipeg, for example, and in Vancouver, and in Calgary and Edmonton, I'll bet you that there are a lot of people lining up to give money to Turner and to support him. And I don't know that MacDonald has a delegate out here in Western Canada, and that's going to matter.
A couple of the bagmen, maybe. It'd be easy to collect money from MacDonald out here, wouldn't it?
I doubt it.
Well, you've got good experience.
For MacDonald?
Yeah, I think you would.
I think it'd be easier to
collect for Turner. A final observation from Dalton Camp with his book Points of Departure. Oh, first of all, I'm going to humiliate you. You still got your own advertising agency, have you?
No.
You've got
still
a company.
It still has my name. I have a company, yes.
Do your own plug.
This is a message.
Just a minute.
But I have to find out where it is.
See the wee red light on the camera?
I've got to commit this to memory first.
Do you see the little red light in the camera?
Is that it?
I want you to tell that camera.
Do I look at the red light?
No, below the red light,
just
into
down.
the lens.
All right, there's a bulletin that's just reached us.
Right.
Dalton Camp will be autographing his new book, Points of Departure, Deneau and Greenberg, 1495, today from 12:30 to 1:30 p.m. at Duthie Books, 919 Robson Street, Vancouver.
Robson Street.
Robson Street.
Correct
that.
Show me Dalton again, will you? Put Dalton's face up. You look shifty.
Want to do a re-ask?
No, you look really shifty on camera. Do you know that?
Well, that's because I can't look at the camera and read this at the same time.
Do you wear in contact lenses?
No. No.
If you were going to run for Prime Minister,
You wouldn't vote for me?
I wouldn't vote for you.
I wouldn't go on television. No.
You'd have to get a transplant.
Well, we'll see about MacDonald, you see. MacDonald would be maybe the first bald-headed Prime Minister.
Listen, Dalton.
No, he wouldn't be.
It'll be quite interesting. I'm conducting my own little wimp watch on the media just now. Right up until the moment of the election, the media, who are mostly kind of liberal brainwashed hacks out of Ottawa, were just waiting for Joe to fall, stumble, spill his coffee. Isn't it funny now that he's Prime Minister that we won't see any pictures like that? And that he will always be presented as dignified, proper, and they won't show pictures of him in embarrassing situations anymore?
You think if he dropped the football, they wouldn't print the picture?
No, I don't. I do. That's what I believe. Don't you?
I wouldn't believe it until he dropped the football. I think they're stalking him. I find that the whole country holds its breath when he walks up a flight of stairs, you know, and when they see him on the film. They still have this image of him as being susceptible to disaster.
You see the schism there is between you and me? You're an Easterner, I'm a Westerner. My opinion of the press gallery in Ottawa is that now that he has the power and can drop the little perks and feed the little tips, that we will see a repetition of the worst of the media coverage in Trudeau's day, in which they'll come on CBC and whatnot and say, the Conservative government today announced such and such and such and such. All men will be turned into women. The intent of the government is such and such and such and such. I'll bet you that the Ottawa media is brainwashed within 6 months in the same way by the Tories as the same way as they were for years by the Libs.
Well, I think you have to take a government more seriously than you take a leader of the opposition. I think that's true.
Do we have a good press gallery in Ottawa?
We have a better one than we had years and years ago when people came down from places such as here and became sycophants for the government and apologists for the government. In fact, lived with the government, were friends and wrote books. I mean, we had some of the greatest journalists in Canada who helped Mackenzie King write speeches, who advised Lester Pearson how to go on television, went on with him, held his hand. You can't get anybody to do that anymore.
The penny has dropped.
Pardon?
The penny has dropped.
I don't know what that means in this context.
I know who you're talking about.
Okay, well, that's the way it was. That's the way it was, and I think no more.
But now, apart from the likes of Charlie Lynch or the odd Deborah or whatnot, we seem to have a terribly young bunch of 35-second radio reporters who never cover anything except the superficiality of it.
Well, I think if you cover politics for instant radio, you have to cover it in headlines. You can't cover it in depth. I don't think it's their fault. I think it's the fault of the technology that they're serving.
Anyway, I understand that you are not going to be asked ever again to attend the Parliamentary Press Gallery dinner. Why is that, Mr. Camp?
Because of the book. I wrote about the gallery dinner, let it all hang out as to what it was about and what it was like and what the Governor General said that I thought was stupid. And I'm not going to be asked back.
No.
But I don't think that ban will last very long.
No.
Somehow.
What was the worst appointment? I don't want you to equivocate in this. That Trudeau made.
Horner.
What was the second worst?
The Governor General.
Well, you're a man of concern.
But I respect the office.
You respect the office.
And I wish the holder of it well.
But you think it was a bad appointment?
I think it was not an appointment that was designed to help the office.
My thanks to Dalton Camp. You'll see him after the next election when he writes his next book on the defeat of Joe Clark, eh?
I doubt that'll be the subject, but we'll see.
My thanks to Dalton Camp. Next, we're going to do a piece on the Moonies. Folks, come on, folks. How many people are coming on the set?
What do you mean there should be a much? There's 2 people coming on, is it? Yeah. Good morning.
Good morning, sir. Do sit down, Chris. I'll take this very cold. And
Jack, how do you want this?
hi, God, you look so
Jack,
bright.
how do you want this?
I'll go on camera.
But who are you going to have it over here?
This lady here.
Okay.
Can I have a pencil, please? Dalton Camp just stole my bloody pencil.
Could you put yourself in there a bit?
No, you can keep it, Dalton. That's right. Name again?
Chris Carlson.
Name?
Virginia Mabry.
M-A-Y?
M-A-B-R-Y.
Mabry. Pronounced Mabry.
Yeah.
I'm Chris Carlson.
Can you put this?
You are ex-Moonies.
Yes.
Deprogrammed.
45 seconds. Can you put this here?
Probably just counselors would be better way to put it.
Where do I need to?
I'll show you.
Up under
30
my-
seconds, Jack. 30 seconds. Can you, this thing sticks in there. So I put it underneath and stick that into there. Okay.
Do I need to put this underneath?
Yeah, put that on. No, that stays on. This
right here.
That's it. Into there, and that puts your 10 seconds, Jack. Who to start off with first, Jack?
I'll go on camera.
On camera by himself.
Many of you remember, and have asked me to repeat again, the program with the Steffiches on the tragic experiences that family had with their son, who is still in California somewhere and is still a Moonie. Many of you remember the story Crazy for God. Some of you will know that on January the 7th next year, a man who describes himself as a minister for the Moonies, a Mr. Porter, will be on this program at 9 a.m. precisely, January the 7th, 1980. I have not made any particular secret of the fact that I don't like the Moonies' techniques. I don't like the Moonies. I don't like the way people kind of disappear into the maw of this strange whatever it is. With me this morning, I've got two people who are going to give us another installment in our knowledge about the followers of the Moonie cult. And one of them is Chris Carlson, who comes from Illinois in the United States, and the other is Virginia Mabry. And they describe themselves as counselors. And I'm going to start with you, Chris. Counselor for what? Were you a Moonie?
Yes, sir, I was. Counselor in the effect that people who have been in a cult have been essentially living in a fantasy world. And to come back into the real world, they need certain kinds of help. Information, support, reassurance, those kinds of things.
You're a deprogrammer.
Yes, sir.
You brainwash young Moonies to make them forget their Moonie cult. Is that the idea?
No, sir.
How long were you a Moonie?
I was in a year and a half.
Where and when?
Well, I joined in the Bay Area, San Francisco, in July of '77, and was sent from there after about 5 or 6 months to New Jersey, where I spent the following year, and was rescued from in New Jersey by my parents with a conservatorship.
Rescued by your parents with a conservatorship.
Yes.
What is a conservatorship?
Conservatorship. It gave my parents a temporary guardianship over me.
Or a legal
60
action.
days. Yes, sir. Taken in court. And they then hired some gentlemen who were familiar with the situation, the cult phenomenon, and those people picked me up and deprogrammed me.
If I snap my fingers again now, the one said, you are a Moonie, you were a Moonie, and you always will be a Moonie, wouldn't you tend to go back to being a Moonie?
No.
No way.
I know what happened and I know what they did to me.
How old are you now?
27.
27. So you were 25 or 24 when they picked you
24,
up,
right.
when you fell into their clutches?
Right.
Virginia, tell me about you.
Well, I joined the Moonies back in October of 1976 and left in November of '77. I joined in the Bay Area. I didn't join the Moonies when I originally joined. I joined a front group for the Moonies called Creative Community Projects, which is, they told me they were teachers and psychologists and that I could teach at their school, which I had been doing prior to meeting the Moonies.
You mean you had been a teacher?
Yes. And so when they offered me a job with their school, they said, well, come up to our camp first. So I went up to their camp, and it was sort of no return after that. I never did get to teach in a school because it never existed. After being in the Moonies in California for about 8 months, they sent me away to Texas, and I became bookkeeper, secretary, and full-time fundraiser for the cult. And then in November of 1977, I walked out.
How did you come to walk out, though?
Well, it's rare. It's rare that people walk out. I was put in a position as being bookkeeper secretary for the group, and I was able to see things that most people don't see. Illegalities, dealing with money, the amount of money we were making was tremendous. And I kept asking, well, where are our programs? What are we doing? And also, there was an internal part of myself that I kept hearing. It's like an inner voice.
But you'd gone through the money conditioning in the first place.
Oh, totally. But there was no one there conditioning me because I was in charge.
Oh, I see. The moment you stopped being conditioned, your common sense began to reawaken. Is that so?
Exactly. And it became stronger and stronger. But they had programmed us that you should die rather than leave the group. We'd even had, at some point, suicide training back in 1976. And so, yeah.
A la Guyana?
Different. It was that if your parents took you to deprogram you, or if you thought about leaving, you should die rather than leave. Because to leave was worse than death. So death was a lighter sentence.
You're telling me the truth?
Yes, the honest truth.
It's a fact.
They showed us how to do it. A nurse showed us how to do it.
How? Oh, don't tell me how. I don't want to get into that kind of
Okay.
thing. That's a kind of repertorial question. But you, when you went down there to Texas, having been trained as a Moonie in California,
Yes.
were you in command of a unit of Moonies?
Well, what happened first was I was a regular Moonie fundraising, and I got very ill.
How did you raise funds?
Okay, every lie that you could come up with, I came up with. Because we were told it's heavenly deception. It's okay to lie to the public because they're Satan, and it's all right to do this for God's work. So I would tell them I was a Christian youth missionary. I would tell them that I was working with a counseling program. I had a number of different lines. And then I would go out and I would go into restaurants, bars, you know, street corners, anywhere, parking lots.
How much money would you raise? How much money were you raising when you were a bookkeeper in whatever it was in Texas?
In Texas, we would make anywhere between $100,000 to $250,000 profit a month.
You're joking.
No,
How many Moonies?
50, and that's after we paid all our expenses.
You mean 50 little slaves?
Yes, exactly. You work 20 hours a day. I mean, you're out on the street in Texas.
And they would bring the money back to you at night? And you'd count up the money?
And it'd be sent away to New York.
Put it in the bank locally?
Well, we sent bank wires, no, to New York.
Bank wire, take it into the bank and send the bank wire to New York?
To New York,
Selling flowers?
Selling flowers, lollipops, candy bars, peanut brittle. If you ran out of food, one time I ran out of candy and things to sell, so I went in and bought little, you know, some little bubble gum kind of candies and sold those. Another thing I wanted to point out is I sold things in a wheelchair, and I wasn't crippled. I mean, obviously, I walked up here. And it was a fraud, but I made twice as much money.
Did you ever take any of it for yourself?
No.
Why not? Don't answer that question. Just a minute. Here we go again. I'm looking forward to Mr. Porter coming here on January the 7th, 1980, after this break. I could have done with some of, no. I was going to say I could have done with a shot in my coffee, but no. No, I don't mean that.
Yeah, no idea. See that?
If you take too much of that, if you take too much of that Benylin, God damn, you get loaded on it.
Sure.
This is an incredible story. God bless the Steffichis. I'm going to have the Steffichis in the studio when Porter is here.
Oh, good.
Oh, great.
Sitting over there watching.
Great.
You may not get out of here alive.
Oh, you should have seen the way I treated this guy, Porter.
He'll sit here and he'll lie to you, and he will go on and on. I mean, you ought to hear the stories they have about me.
I
See
told.
the thing about 60 Minutes did last night on Core, hey?
On
Same
who?
thing, Core.
Oh yes, on not Corey, you've got the wrong name.
Core, isn't it Core?
Yeah, C-O-R-E.
Ready?
Committee of
15
Racial
seconds. Coming back
Equality.
on one.
What's core?
Committee on Racial Equality in the United
6
States.
minutes.
It's a black self-help
Yeah.
group. Black self-help group. Any coloured people in Moonies? Any blacks in Moonies? I'm going to go back now to Chris Carlson. Chris, I can tell from what Virginia has told me up to now that she can give me the classic pattern story of a young person who gets involved with the Moonies and through a front organization eventually gets sucked in, believes every word, and she was lucky to break away. Right. How were you dragged into the, how did you become a Moonie?
Okay, well, I joined under the same front group, name of Creative Community Project.
In San Francisco?
Right, in San Francisco.
This seems to be the central funnel for the West Coast anyway.
They are the most successful, or that group is the most successful branch of recruiting in the Moonies in this country. And the method used there, which is maximum deception, is now spreading across the country, primarily in Denver, Colorado, in a group called Sunburst. Mm-hmm. And they found that there's a direct relationship between deception and number of people brought into the group. The more deception, the more people join. So they use that method.
So you were sucked in, you went through the training period,
right.
And did you become a slave?
It's a good way to put it. I think so. Because
well, how would you describe it? Because I don't like the Moonies, and I tend to exaggerate a little bit.
I've never really called myself or looked back on myself as a slave, but I definitely was operating under the strong influence of someone else.
What was the philosophy which impressed you in the first case?
Probably the chance to work together with a lot of people for a common cause, a good cause.
And what was that good cause?
Well, to try to care about other people, serve mankind, which is very vague and general. Mm-hmm. But in staying vague and general, they are able to draw more people. Once you are drawn by the initial idealistic flourish of helping mankind, they try to tap in to the specific reason why you might stay. Some people are held emotionally, some are held logically, pseudologically.
Are all of the young people who are sucked in through the funnel in San Francisco kind of vaguely rootless, idealistic kids?
Yeah, yeah, I think so, in general.
Quite a high IQ, but not quite settled in their direction in life. Yeah, right. Were you like that?
Definitely.
Had you been to college?
Yes, I just graduated about a month before I
joined. In what?
In drama.
You graduated in drama. Mm-hmm. Now, you went into this place in San Francisco. What did you do for the Moonies then?
Well, I mostly witnessed when I was in the Bay Area. That means, that's the term used to describe going out on the street and trying to get new members. To come over to dinner, go to Boonville, their camp up in I think it's in Mendocino County, and then go on to Camp K, which is the 3-week recruiting program.
Now, you were in from July 77 until 78 sometime.
November 78.
November 78.
I just celebrated my anniversary of freedom.
All right, just a year ago. And were you a happy Moonie until you were seized by your parents?
I wouldn't say happy, no. I was more a very mission-oriented, directed Moonie. I was there because it was a responsibility I had to serve God. That's the point I reached. Mm-hmm. I did not really enjoy being a Moonie, no.
What were you doing for the Moonies at the time?
I was doing some witnessing, and I had done a lot of fundraising throughout, but at the time I was running a flower stand in West Orange, New Jersey, to raise money just to run our center.
Standing there saying?
Well, I was working under the front name of the Sunrise Flower Company. The state leader and I started the flower business called the Sunrise Flower Company. And we were making fairly good money just setting up a card table and putting out lots of flowers.
How much were you getting as a...
Not a cent.
Just your keep?
Yeah, room and board is what came from it all.
And lots of peanut butter?
Well, not too much, but enough. More so in the Bay Area.
On the positive side, I suppose you can say of the Moonies that they are not riddled with drugs, alcohol, or sex.
You can say that very safely.
Why not? You'd think they might be.
Well, there are two possibilities. One, it sure is a righteous way to live if you don't have those things interfering. Two, if you look at ways of controlling a mass of people, you eliminate those factors because those help people deviate from the line of control.
All right, here you are in New Jersey with your maximum deception or your heavenly deception, and you're selling flowers for the Sunrise Flower Company. Mm-hmm. And then how were you picked out and rescued?
Well, we were doing what it was, we were playing some softball in the parking lot right next to the house that was our center. And a car bottomed out coming into the parking lot, and they pulled up right next to me, and 3 guys jumped out, and we had a scuffle, and they grabbed me and gently but firmly placed me into the car. And my mom was there, and we drove off. And 3 other guys held off the Moonies that had come out of the house, and then they drove off, and no one was hurt. And I was deprogrammed.
No one was hurt?
No one was hurt. In
fact,
one of the Moonies attacked one of the guys with the baseball bat that he had, it was taken away from him, and the same Mooney slugged a couple of the guys that picked me up.
Well, if they'd followed the normal tradition that the Moonies seem to do, at that time they might well have gone to the New Jersey State Police and laid a charge of kidnap against your mother and father.
Well, they did go to the police in Passaic, which was where our center was. I don't know exactly how the police responded, but I think they were sympathetic.
In California, we know of a case where the police were anything but sympathetic, and there was a kidnap warrant out for the parents, the Steffiches.
Yes.
Was there not? Some kind of warrant was out for the Steffiches. Do you remember being deprogrammed?
Oh, sure.
How was it done?
Well, talk. There was no tempting with women and food and lust and money like I was warned, no being tied into a chair, and no torture, which are things, strange as it may sound, you are warned will happen to you if you get into a deprogramming situation.
You mean while you're a Mooney?
Yes,
They'll
while
tell
you're
you
a Mooney.
that evil people might come and take you away and tempt you with women and booze and whatnot.
Sure. None of those things happened. Definitely, I was held in a motel room, but had I not been, I wouldn't have been deprogrammed, because the programming kept coming into my head, and anytime I was backed into a corner with a fact or piece of information, I would have taken off if I had my choice. But I was forced to deal with that information.
How long before you realized that you were glad to be out of the Moonies?
3 days.
It was 3 days.
Well, as soon as I knew, as soon as my mind clicked back into gear.
What then did you realize once your mind clicked back into gear? Virginia over here realized she was being used as a money mill. Is that correct?
That's part of it, yeah.
What else did you realize when you finally broke away?
Well, see, I didn't realize it at first. I just realized that there was something wrong, and I wanted to go spend time with God for 3 days is what I chose to do. I'd been fasting and praying and doing everything we're supposed to do, and it still wasn't working. So when I went away, I promised my mother I'd talk to a priest, and I went to Eugene, Oregon, and there was a priest there who spoke with me. He happened to be a deprogrammer as well. And what finally convinced me was reading Moon's speeches again and seeing what a fanatic this man was and what he had planned for the world. And I think along with that was the fact that they have this history time chart which equals Moon's birth being the Messiah. In 1920, the Messiah will come from Korea, you know, and they have this whole history chart that's elaborate and beautiful. As soon as I sat down with the history book and checked up the dates, they were all off.
Hold your breath. We're going to talk about the Moon chart for world domination?
Yes.
World domination?
The providential time limits.
No kidding?
Yes.
And all these kids believe it?
Yes.
Yep.
After the break. I'm speaking to two young Mooney counselors. One is Virginia Mabry, and the other is Chris Carlson, isn't it? Did you know we had the Steffich husband and wife, father and mother on the program. Did you run into Mike Steffich at all in California, in the Bay Area?
Yes, I was with him when he first joined. I was an older Mooney at that time, which they call an older sister, when he first joined. And when he first came in, he was, you know, a little leery of the group and kind of questioning a lot of things. But before long, you know, he was slowly sucked under, so to say, until he was under the control. And at one point, well, there were several points. He wanted to leave, and he kept saying, I want to go back to Canada. But we would, you know, what we called love bomb him, convince him that this was the place he had to stay. He couldn't leave God. If he left, he would be leaving God.
How many of you would love bomb him? A group of you?
Yeah, usually a couple of 5 people, something like that.
Sit around with him and love bomb him?
Love bomb him. You know, say wonderful things about him. I mean, we meant it. But at the same time, it was also, we felt desperate. If he left, he would ruin, you know, his family and Canada's chance of being saved. I mean, you know, he was considered a
Well, his mother and father grabbed him at one time, took him to a motel, I think it was Sausalito.
Yes.
The Moonies came and kind of, quote, just to shorten the story, retrieved him. And now he's back with the Moonies.
Well, I was there.
When he came back?
I was there at the motel when they rescued him. And it was unfortunate, but Michael had not had enough time to complete. He was questioning things. He was starting to wonder are
So
the...
you were there when there was all the fuss and
Yes.
Mrs. Steffage was trying to get into a
Yes.
car to go away, and it was surrounded, as I recall, by Moonies?
Oh, yes. I went to go get help, call for help, because I was afraid the Moonies might get violent. They cornered me in a phone booth and proceeded to, two big guys knock me around. So I had to escape from them and get back to the motel room. We were there talking to Michael. We were trying to show him things like the time chart, how he's been lied to, show him Moon's speeches, and show him documents about what brainwashing is and mind control. And it was just a matter of sitting and talking to him, and the Moonies came. You know, maybe talking to me is torture, but he now claims he was tortured, and there was nothing like that. And I think what happened was Michael was very attached emotionally to the people, and I understand that because it's a very strong emotional bond that you get with the people. And I feel if he had just had time on neutral ground, not even with me or with his parents or with the Moonies, just neutral ground to look at these facts.
That's what he was supposed to have, but it didn't come about that way. Give me some of the Moon philosophy then, and this time chart, this history time chart.
Okay, the time chart, it's called the Parallels of History. What it says simply is that God has been trying to, since the fall of man, which happened because of what Adam and Eve did, which was illicit, sin. Claiming to be illicit sex, as part of Moon's theology. God has been trying to prepare man to receive another Messiah. And so essentially it's been 3 2,000-year segments of time since Adam and Eve. And there will be parallel events in each of these 3 lines of history, 3 2,000-year periods. And supposedly the end of the 3rd one leads up to Moon being born, which, if you take it historically, factually, is not the case.
Moon is the Savior.
Moon is the Lord of the Second Advent. Jesus come back.
The Messiah. There's no doubt about it.
I mean, that's how they feel about it. And if he is the Messiah, then anything he says you should do. And they claim Jesus failed. Jesus failed his mission, and because Jesus failed his mission...
Moon has come back to do the job.
Exactly.
In a good commercial manner.
Exactly. Right. Make all the money in the world.
How much money has Moon got?
Millions. I mean, I couldn't even tell you. I know that they make approximately $1.5 million a week in the United States.
How many Moonies are there in the United States?
Only about 5,000, maximum.
They're now proselytizing in small towns in British Columbia here and selling flowers and doing the candy and the usual thing.
The most money to be made is in Canada because people don't know about the Moonies. The easiest recruits are Canadians in San Francisco because they don't know about the Moonies.
Are there many Canadian kids identified as such down in the Bay Area?
Yes, many.
But they're apparently quite brainwashedly happy to be there.
Well.
But the U.S. immigration doesn't help to get them out of the country, I know that much.
No. Well, what they do is they take them on flower trips, bring them across the border, and bring them back.
To re-enter them. What about Mooney's actual philosophy? Somebody was once telling me that he wants to take over the world, not just as a Lord of the Second Advent, but he's got some political philosophy.
Oh,
what is it?
He believes that all politicians are corrupt, and that the only way to get rid of it is to get rid of the politicians and to find a theocratic government where he, as ruler of the world, will control all people, and all people will worship him, and by worshiping him and believing in him, God will control the world.
Sounds precisely like the Ayatollah in Iran.
Oh, yes. I mean, I'm watching it, it's very shocking for me because I keep thinking, what if Moon got that power? What if that was Moon and Moonies?
Have you ever seen this man, Moon?
Yes, many times.
Where do you see him? Where does he live?
Well, when I was stationed in New Jersey, we were about 40 minutes from Belvedere, which is where Moon gives his Sunday speeches. So we would go see him about 3 times a month. And about a half an hour from the New Yorker, which is the United States Missionary Center, I believe it is. I forget the exact name of it. But
is he an impressive man?
Not really. He's definitely energetic, incredibly arrogant, bombastic. He's about 5'4", 5'5", maybe, stocky, big round face. He's got a certain kind of strength about him, and a charisma, definitely. But definitely not the man who I would bow down to as I did as a Mooney.
Some people say that he's very right-wing politically. Yeah. Well, if he wants a theocratic regime, obviously he's right-wing politically.
I'd say more fascistic. than anything. He's probably the closest second to Hitler that the world's seen in a long time.
Sun Myung Moon.
Yes.
Is that his name?
Yes,
Well,
Sun Myung.
actually, his name used to be, I don't know the Korean name for it, but it meant shining dragon. He changed it to sun shining moon because of what the Bible says about the serpent being the Antichrist, and so he changed it to sun shining moon because that means the Lord of the Second Advent.
Yeah, the dragon was too close to a serpent.
Yeah.
So he changed it to the sun.
So he better
shining
change
moon.
it, yeah.
It's fearsome, isn't it?
It is.
Do you feel as if you're free of monies?
Now, yes.
Do you?
Very much, finally.
More with Chris and Virginia after this break.
Of course, it opened up all kinds of things, and the Senate called for an investigation. So. Oh no, she's crying again.
You've got 10 seconds. How long are you in town for?
We're leaving as soon as this is over. We were here for a couple days, visiting statues.
Take some cutaways, put your cigarette.
They're like
Okay.
families.
Okay, just be
Yeah.
looking at Jack.
No speaking. No speaking. Just look.
And then
I want to get my terms of reference right. And this is Chris Carlson, ex-Mooney, and this is Virginia Mabry, ex-Mooney. You are people, youngsters, both of whom were successfully indoctrinated by Sun Myung Moon's people, right?
Yes.
You were in it for a year, or almost a year, and you too,
Year and a half.
year and a half. You broke away because of your own common sense when you realized how much loot you were collecting from people under false pretenses and shipping to the Mooney bank account, right?
Yes.
And you were broken away because your parents hired some deprogrammers to kidnap you and deprogram you.
Right.
Is that correct?
Yes.
I don't know what one does to warn youngsters. Can you warn young Canadians liable to be in the Bay Area what not to do?
Okay, there was a short slogan that I just heard. You may be alone, and they may be nice, but don't go to dinner with them. Now that is a good thing to remember in any American city if you're traveling, if you're a foreigner especially, because you're not as aware of the...
Seattle Tacoma Airport is full of them.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And one thing to remember, your initial experiences will probably be pleasant.
Pleasant.
And that's what you need to be careful of. Just because you get an emotional rush at first doesn't mean that that's where you have to spend the rest of your life.
What would you tell young Canadians going down to the Bay Area?
Basically, watch out for, again, for people coming up to you and talking to you, and especially people who are probing you about, oh, where are you from? And, oh, I'm from there. And just because they seem like they're common ground with you, or
Come for dinner.
Don't go.
And if they take you for dinner, you'll get a nice dinner, will you?
Oh, you'll get a nice dinner. There'll be people singing to you and loving you and caring for you, but it's all a front. And the thing is, you don't realize 3 weeks later you'll be out on the streets making money for a man who plans to take over the world. I mean, and you'll believe this guy's a messiah who isn't. You know,
Yeah.
so just the basic thing is, they may seem nice, but don't go. Don't
Yeah.
go.
But it can only, I mean, if somebody had come up to me when I was 18 or 19 and said, come and be a Mooney, I'd have clouted them.
But they wouldn't have said it that way. They would have found out what you liked. And then they would have said, are you kidding? So I'm into that, or wow, you're from Canada. Oh, tell me about it. And then you talk about yourself, and pretty soon you feel like they're your best friend.
And then on comes the propaganda.
Then on comes the dinner, and after the dinner, still you don't hit the propaganda for about 7 days.
Could it not be that there are many parents who go down to these family nights at the Mooney enclaves and come away convinced the youngsters are happy and doing good work?
Yes.
Sure. I tell you, especially parents who've seen their children go through the hairy, grubby phase and now see them as clean-shaven, short-haired Moonies who
Freaks.
don't do drugs. And, I mean, who wouldn't go, well, maybe there is something good happening here? What parent, I mean, but you have to, as a parent, you need to look carefully beyond that.
When
and
you say
see-
working 20 hours a day, of course, you're only joking. Give me a day in the life of a Moonie as you were.
20 hours.
Yeah, okay. Well, I did both fundraising with a national fundraising team and witnessing at a witnessing center. So, would you prefer either one in particular?
Fundraising.
Fundraising, okay. I would get up 6 o'clock. We would leave the New Yorker 6:30, and we would drive to the spot where we would be fundraising, somewhere either in New Jersey.
By fundraising, you mean street collecting in the street.
Okay.
You mean begging on the streets.
Okay, fundraising is a very offensive activity. I mean, you don't stand there and wait. You go after
But
them.
you're begging on the streets.
Yes, that's the basic.
You become a
line.
beggar for Sun Young Moon.
Yeah.
You
That's
say, I'm
reasonable
working
to
for
say.
a youth counseling service. We're helping people in the far and troubled sections of the country. Please give me $2 for my tulip.
Can't you help? I mean, you could give something, right? Anything? And the thing is, you go after that money because you know, or you're taught, that if they give money, they're helping the Messiah's work. So you think you're saving their lives.
Even if they give a penny. So you, I mean, you nail little
You're all
kids.
over them.
Oh yeah, and you come up to a woman, you say, you look lovely today. Would you help our youth group out? You know, big smile, warm heart, you know.
I mean, it wouldn't be so bad if you were keeping the money for yourself to go on a drunk or something, would it? But you're not.
It would make more sense.
You basically take that money back and you count it up and you hand it over to somebody like yourself, and you'll go to the bank and buy a money order and send it where?
We send it to the Holy Spirit Association for the Unification of World Christianity, bank account, Chemical Bank,
Just
New
a minute.
York.
The Holy Spirit Association for the
Unification of World Christianity, bank account, Chemical Bank, New York.
Chemical Bank.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's happened to be the bank we banked with.
The Chemical Bank.
Chemical Bank of New York, yes.
How do you spell chemical? As in chemical.
Like, as in chemical. C-H-E-M-I-C-L.
The Holy Spirit
Yeah.
Association for the Unification of World Christianity, bank account, Chemical Bank, New York, New York. And you'd send how much?
Well, we send it off twice a week, so usually around $10,000 or more, $15,000, sometimes $20,000.
What did you get as a salary?
Nothing, nothing.
Clothes.
No, not even that. They took everything I owned when I joined. I had a 2-bedroom house with everything in it, my bank account, my savings account. I know people have given them thousands of dollars.
You gave them your house.
Well, everything in it, yeah, everything. My car, my bank account. They took everything, and at that point, what happened was they gave me in return, oh, go down to the basement and pick out some clothes, because see, my clothes weren't appropriate. You had to wear certain kind of clothes, sort of humble-looking clothes.
Kind of granny gowns.
No, you wore pants, but they were polyester knit pants, and shirts had to be buttoned up to
Kind
here.
of respectable.
Oh
grubbies.
yes, very, very much.
Did
Cut
you-
off my hair.
Did you give them anything at all?
Well, I didn't have that much to give, but I did. Yeah, I gave them some money. And I don't even remember how much it was.
You'd been to university. You'd got a degree in drama. Had you been to university?
Yes, and I was a teacher. Well, actually worked with emotionally disturbed adolescents. So it's intelligent. I mean, it's educated. They don't want the run-of-the-mill. My first witnessing experience, which is recruiting, I thought we were supposed to save the world, so I went down Market Street in San Francisco, which is winos and derelicts and, you know. And I went down and invited everybody to dinner because I thought we were supposed to save the world. So all these people come to dinner and they're like, I mean, everybody's going, who invited them to dinner? I mean, they were like hysterical. And so finally said, oh, Virginia. And I went, yeah, we're going to save the world. And they said, no, 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 God's not ready for those people. God wants upper middle class, educated, and, you know, all this. And they told me the kind to look for. And after that, I looked for those kind.
They're called high-quality people.
Yes.
Certain high-quality people is who you're supposed to bring.
Don't lose that bit of film. That's wonderful. After the break. The more you hear about the monies, the more it makes you up, Chuck. Really it does. Chris Carlson and Virginia Mabry. And Virginia had just told us with astonishing elan that they don't want the down-at-hill rubby-dubs, wino, or poor, underprivileged people. They want middle-class youngsters, bright of visage and cheery of face, who can be good fundraisers for the master.
Yes.
Eh? Is that the only function of this thing? Are you trying to tell me, you two intelligent youngsters, that the only function of the Unification Church is to raise money for the greater glorification of Sun Myung Moon?
Yes, and to recruit people so that they can raise more money.
But there's only 5,000 to tell me in the whole of the continental United States, perhaps.
But they're very busy.
Yes. You work
put 'em
20
out-
hours a day.
12 to 20 hours.
Yeah, 7
On the
days a
street.
week.
But he's not going for political control,
Oh,
is
well,
he?
yeah, he is that too. But you can get political control. Oh, I'm going to make a statement.
on.
You can get political control if you have money.
If you have enough money.
Yes.
You can buy congressmen and all kinds of people if you have enough money.
That's right.
But even the United States, as well as Canada, neither of us is that venal. How do you explain this cult from among your generation? How do you explain it?
Oh boy.
There's a real need in our generation. We were given a lot as a generation, so it left us a lot of time to think about things, to wonder, who am I? What is my purpose and meaning in life? How can I do great things? Also, just the fact that we're such a mobile society, and it's very difficult to just move into an area, meet people.
Yeah.
You know,
I think you've got the point there. One, you were given a lot. Two, you never really had to worry where your next meal came from.
That's right.
Thirdly, the family unit is broken up.
exactly.
Youngsters are mobile, and when they're mobile, they tend to be lonely and will respond to a friendly face in the Bay Area or Passaic, New Jersey, or anywhere else.
Right.
And once you get them in the clutches. But the evil personified by Sun Myung Moon in this plan to use young people for this purpose is almost beyond credibility.
He's also striving for validity. He has done great things with the fishing industry in America. I don't mean good for America, but I mean as far as furthering his own interests. He spent a lot of money buying a shipbuilding firm down in Alabama and fishing fleets in Gloucester, Mass., Norfolk, Virginia, in San Francisco, and he's working up in Alaska now also. He has made plans and has stated his plans to monopolize the fishing industry in America.
And do Moonies work for him on these fish boats,
Yeah.
or merely ordinary people work for him on the fish boats?
They hire regular people too,
Mostly Moonies, though.
but mostly Moonies.
Mostly Moonies.
They're cheaper.
Yeah, he doesn't have to pay them.
And no union problems with the Moonies.
No.
It's time for a couple of calls, maybe one or two. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I'm really shocked at the uneducated people we have in our community out here in Cloverdale. We had a Mooney come into the financial institute I work in selling peanuts, and I phoned the police department to be told by the secretary there that she didn't know who the Moonies were. I phoned my daughter's high school and was told by the principal that they didn't know who the Moonies were either. And it seems to me that you're doing an excellent job of educating the public, but perhaps it should be going a little further.
There are some high schools and schools watch Webster in the morning. More of them should on mornings when we've got the Moonies on, I'll tell you that. I trust you phoned the license inspector and said if they got license to flog their peanuts.
The police department did. I got through to a constable who was aware of who the Moonies were, and he phoned to be told that they didn't need a license as long as they were only doing it occasionally.
Well, that's the score, of course. You see, who cares about a few Moonies selling a few peanuts?
I guess so.
Well, thanks very much for your call, ma'am. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, Mr. Webster, I think my call is a repeat of the last one. I live in Richmond. There are two girls working in this area selling peanuts for the Youth Foundation Church.
That sounds like the Unification Church.
Or maybe it's Unification Church.
Yeah.
I phoned the RCMP, and I said I was going to give these girls a bad time. I was going to demand their license.
Yeah.
But they say they do not require a license at that time. This was 2 weeks ago.
They do in Vancouver.
In Vancouver, yes, but not
Yeah.
in Richmond.
I'm sure they do in Richmond too. You require a peddler's license of some description before you can sell anything on the streets under the Municipal Act. I'm almost sure.
The corporal here said it's not necessary then, but he thought a bylaw was going to be passed within a week.
He may be right. Well, I would urge everyone who runs up against somebody selling peanuts for the Unification Church to say loudly and bluntly, no, 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 go away, and tell the people at your City Hall. Give me that number for those who want to get in touch with my friends who are ex-Moonies and with the Steffichis. Box 1306, Station A, Vancouver, V6C 2TT. too. And what are you doing for a living now? Just counseling?
Well, I've been doing some counseling, and doing some traveling to visit a lot of friends. I've been
Chris
catching
Carlson, you're still living in New Jersey?
No, sir.
Where?
I've been living in the Southwest.
And Virginia Mabry are living now in?
San Francisco, California.
Well, stay away from strange invitations to dinner on the street. I'll be back thanks to these two young people, and I'll be back after this break.
Linda will be here.
Hey, Stephen, that was great.
Yeah.
We'll run that again during Christmas, too. Along with your interview.
No problem.
Busy morning.
Very busy.
Dalton Camp, Age of the Klutz and the Wimp Watch, indeed. These two Moonies, the ex-Moonies, were good too, weren't they?
Horrifying.
What have you got for tomorrow?
Chief Don Winterton, Vancouver City Police.
Oh yeah, we're talking the prostitution problem. He's been down to Ottawa. And
Mark Rose, the NDP MP for Mission.
well, we haven't had an NDP around for a while, have we? Equal
Not for a
time.
while. Right.
So we've got, what are for the rest of the week? We're going to do the compensation board,
Right.
I believe.
We're going to be talking about illegal suites.
Oh yes, and we've got Jonathan Baker on the illegal suites. And we've got politically what's happening in the province. We're going to have the usual busy week. Tomorrow morning's Tuesday, 9 a.m. precisely.